do I need to be on the Twitch as well?
No, but I don't think there's a way for me to be on the background of the StreamYard on my phone and just watching it. So I'm gonna have to be on the Twitch following along.
Because am I going to see? Oh, I will see the comments, won't I? Because if I click on comments, I'll see.
You know, we are live. In case you wanted to know that, because
we're live already. Wow. Okay,
we are
live. Hello, everyone. Hi.
I just happened to be logging in, and I was like, I see that I can hear myself.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Hello. Welcome. We're doing a Kanzashi workshop at the moment. So I'm Jessica Corlett, as you can see, and I am in London. I don't know if you can hear the bell ringing outside my window telling me it's 6 o'clock. It's not Big Ben, it's the church next to me, but I am definitely in London. And I am joined by my lovely glamorous assistant, Hayley.
Hello.
You have beautiful hands, Hayley.
Thank you.
Excellent hand modeling.
And coffee. I have coffee.
Coffee is very important. I have squash because it's a bit late in the day to be drinking caffeine where I am. So good morning, America, because I know most of you are in the States. I'm, as I said, in England, where it is currently 6 p.m. Thank you for the compliments on the accent. I did mention on Facebook I've got a very strong English accent. Years ago, I went to an amazing Lolita meetup in New York where we went to see the Statue of Liberty and we had a picnic. This is like about 10 years ago. And I swear no one listened to a word I said. Or me. They were all just telling me how lovely my accent was. I do have a very strong English accent. Good morning. Good morning. I can see a few other people have got their Starbucks ready. This is great. So we've got 90 minutes, an hour and a half, and I am hoping that in that time I can teach you guys all the skills you need to know to make a little Kanzashi hair accessory. Now, I'm modeling one of them here already, and I'm gonna just up on camera bring in another example. So this is a purple one. Let me just move my cutting mat out of the way. There we go. Okay. This is a little purple version I've done. So this is what I'm going to be teaching you how to make today. So it's made up of, basically there's two main techniques we're using here. So we're making these flowers, the larger flowers at the top. So that's what we'll learn first of all, how to make larger flowers, which have, like a single one has 5 petals. You make 2 and stack them on top of each other, you get 10 petals. And then I'm also going to show you how to make these little dangling flower charms as well, which are done using a slightly different fabric folding technique, but they're also very easy to make. And there's lots of things you can do with these once you've made them. So here I've kind of put them on a little string, make a little sort of dangle off the hair of my end of my hair accessory. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do today. So I know some of you are probably just watching and some of you are going to be having a go at making along while we do this. So if you are making along, you want to cut out some little squares of fabric. Now, I've already started cutting some out. That's what I was doing when we started. So squares I have cut out are 2-inch squares. Oh, and thank you very much, Ray, our background mod. She has just posted a link, which is to the worksheet for this workshop. Now, I'm going to cover everything that's mentioned in this worksheet, but there is a link there posted which will give you to my website where you can download this PDF worksheet. It just prints out on one sheet of paper that shows you the step-by-step of how to make these first flowers that we're going to be learning. So if anyone wants to grab that, hop over to my website and you can download yourself a PDF copy to refer to later. But as I said, it's not essential. We're going to cover everything you need to know during the workshop anyway. So you can cut yourself out some little 2-inch squares. Now, what I will say is these flowers work best if they're made with very thin fabric. We're going to do a lot of gathering up in the center of the flowers. And so for that reason, you need to have quite thin fabric that you're using.
How many squares do we need?
So you will need, for one flower, you need 10 squares. So I'm going to hold up here. This is a single flower. Now this is actually a double version. So it's doubled up. There's basically 2 5-pointed flowers stacked on top of each other here. A single flower, this is what it looks like if you just make it with 5 petals. So if you can imagine, you're going to make 2 of these 5-petal flowers and sew them on top of each other and make a pointed flower. And as Hayley is demonstrating, you can just rip 2-inch strips. If you've got a fabric that rips easily, and because you're going to need quite a lot of squares for these, I would recommend, my preferred way to get all the squares is to cut a big long strip and then chop that strip up into little 2-inch sections. That's how I do it. Now, 2 inches is what I would use if I was using a very thin fabric. And these ornament, the one I'm wearing here and this other one that I'm showing you, they're both done with 2-inch squares. Now, if you're using a thicker fabric than, like, say, silk, so thin fabric would be something like silk or some sort of flimsy polyester, something like that. If you're using a thicker fabric, like, for instance, quilting cotton, someone saying they've got some galaxy fabric, that sounds amazing. Please share a photo when you've finished. I definitely want to see a galaxy version of this flower. If you've got a thicker fabric, so like a quilting cotton, it's going to be difficult to do all those tight gathers in the center. Now, this little flower here is this, you can see it's made out of a thicker cotton, more like a quilting cotton weight. And this was made with 2.5-inch squares so that I could get the gathers to work. So if you don't have a really thin fabric, just cut slightly bigger squares and size up your flower a little bit. Just to give you a sense of scale, so I'm just going to hold this on my, so that's a 2.5-inch flower with 2.5-inch squares. So that's quite nice on its own as a single flower. If you want to do like what I'm wearing, which is the little cluster of 3 flowers and with the little dangles, I'd go for a 2-inch square or maybe smaller if you're ambitious and you want to try something fiddly. Ooh, got dangles fluttering in my face. Amazing. You probably can't hear the jingles. Mine have little bells on because it's Christmas. So I've got a nice little sound effect going on here. It's one of the things I like to do. I'm making hair accessories. I quite like putting little bells in hair accessories just to give it a jingle. It's rather fun. And if you're making accessories for children, you can hear it. Yay! If you're making hair accessories for children, children love having jingly bells on their flower hair accessories. That's a really nice idea to do. Okay, so hopefully some of you are armed with little squares. So we're going to start off with just 1 square. And what I'm actually going to do, when I teach this ordinarily as a workshop, I normally start off by getting people to just do a leaf to start off with. So the way we do the leaves is exactly the same as how we do the petals. If I hold that up there, you can see that this is just a 5-petaled flower here. It's not a double one with 10. And you can see that the leaves are exactly the same as the petals, which is one of the reasons why it makes such lovely poinsettias. I realized a few years ago, if you do this in red, they look just like Christmas poinsettias, which makes it a lovely Japanese themed Christmas craft to do. So I'm going to start off by doing a leaf just to show you one. When people are doing it for the first time, I start them off with a leaf so that they can practice doing it once. So I'm going to cut a needle, cut some thread, and grab a needle. If I can find a needle, here we are. Needle and thread. Okay, and I'm going to tie a knot in my thread. See what we do normally. Okay, and now we're on to the clever bit. So this is the bit you need to pay attention to, and I'll show this again in a minute. So we start off with our little square, and what you're going to do is you're going to fold it in half, make a triangle like that, so that the corners are matching up. There we are. In half to make a triangle. Then you're going to fold it in half again to make a smaller triangle. So this is now a quarter of the original square. So you've got something like that. And what you've got is you will have all your raw edges all on top of each other across the top. And the bottom 2 points of your triangle will be the folded edges. And it's the folded edges that are going to become the edges of the petal. And all the raw edges are going to disappear into the middle of the flower. Lovely. Right. Okay. So then what you do is grab a needle and thread. Now I'm using white thread simply so you guys can see my stitches. Obviously, I would recommend using a thread that is a similar color to the fabric you're working with. So what I'm going to do now is I'm basically going to sew a running stitch across the top of the raw edges of the triangle, going through all 4 layers of the fabric. Now, do not be tempted to do a teeny weeny intricate little running stitch. You don't want to do tiny stitches. You want to do kind of nice big stitches. I normally end up doing about 5 stitches, I'd say, across the top of my triangle. So I'm just going to pull that through. Here you go. Right, so hopefully you can see that's what I've got. I've got my little running stitch across the top, and I've got my thread hanging out one end. And if I turn it over, you can see I've got a little knot in the end of my thread at one end. And then what you're going to do is you're going to pull it up like a drawstring, and it will gather up to form a little leaf or petal shape. How are you getting on, Hayley? That looks right. Yeah, perfect.
Huzzah!
Ta-da! Just like that. And that's basically how simple this is. That is the tricky bit. It's not tricky at all. As I said, the lovely thing about these is, you know, they look like my hair ornament, they look so beautiful and intricate, and they're actually, like, technically they're very simple to make. It's very simple techniques going on. There's a lot of Japanese crafts where, like with origami, you might do something quite simple, like making a paper crane on its own, but then you make hundreds of them and add them all together, and it makes something that's really rather fabulous. And that's what's kind of going on for this craft technique, and the one I'm going to teach you later on. It's actually a very simple little thing that we're doing. I'm just doing, now that I've gathered up my leaf, I'm just doing a few little stitches on top of each other to act as a sort of knot, so that it's not going to come undone, and then I can cut my thread off like that. There we go. So there's my first little leaf done. So we're going to carry on, and I'm going to show you how to do a flower now. To do the flower, it's basically exactly the same thing, but we're going to do 5 of these petals all side by side. So I'm still using my white thread. I'm going to grab another square. Now this fabric I'm using here, this is kind of, the green I had was a sort of faux silk, which is gorgeous. The red fabric I've got is actually, you can't tell, but it's actually a horrible flimsy polyester, the kind of thing that just frays all over the place. And if you tried to sew it with it under a machine, it'd be bouncing around and jumping out from underneath. Really annoying material to sew with. But for this kind of craft, these sorts of flimsy materials that are a bit difficult to work with are actually perfect. Now, to make this a little easier to work, I actually starched this before I cut the squares out of it, just so that it's a bit more easier while I'm working it. But already, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of starting to fray quite a lot, which isn't going to be a problem for this craft. This is definitely an activity that works for fabrics that fray really badly. So again, I've got my square. I'm going to fold it into a triangle. I'm going to fold it into a triangle again. So I've now got a quarter triangle, and I've got all my raw edges all on top of each other across the top, and the 2 bottom corners of the triangle are the folded edges. And then I'm going to take my needle and thread again, and I'm going to go up, down, up, down, up, down, little running stitch. Obviously I've got a knot in the end of my thread, and I'm going to do a little running stitch across the top. There we go. So it looks like that. And then I'm going to draw it up like a little drawstring. And then this is not illustrated on my worksheet, but I highly recommend doing this. Once I've gathered it up, I'm going to do a few little stitches on top of each other like a knot to stop those gathers from coming undone. but I'm not going to cut the thread off. I'm going to leave the thread attached, and I'm going to add the next petal onto the same thread alongside it. So exactly the same thing again. Fold it into a triangle, fold it into a quarter triangle, and then my little running stitch across the top to gather it all together. So there we go. There's my next one on my string. So I'm going to push it down to the bottom so it's next to the first petal. And then I'm going to drawstring it up, gather it up, I should say, and do a few little stitches. Hold those gathers closed before I add the next petal on. And we're just going to keep doing this until we have 5 petals on the string. So there you go. You can see them side by side. Now, as I add each petal, I like to kind of twist it and arrange it so it's alongside the first one, because what the petals will try to do is they'll try and all point off in different directions. So as I add each one, I just kind of push it and twist it around so it's fanned out correctly alongside the previous one. And I'm just going to keep doing that. And we'll do that until we've got 5 all on the same thread. So whilst we're doing that, and everyone else is stitching along too, this probably would be a good opportunity. Oh, someone has said it's a prairie point. Now that's a quilting term, isn't it? So in the UK, we don't have the same sort of quilting culture that you guys have in America, though quilting is definitely getting a lot more popular. Like, crafts in general are really booming in the UK, but in England, we don't have the same sort of like mainstream craft culture that you guys have in the States. We certainly don't have Joanne's and Michael's in every city up and down the country. But yes, someone's saying it's a prairie point, which I have heard of prairie points before. Yeah. So Hayley, hello. I know you are. So one of the reasons Hayley was roped in to be my glamorous hand assistant in this little workshop was because I know you are quite knowledgeable and interested in kimono fashion.
That would be my secondary hobby. Yep, I'm into it.
What's your first hobby?
Oh, I mean, sewing was a hobby, but now it's my job.
Oh, okay. I'm the opposite way around. Well, sort of the opposite round. Sewing used to be my full-time job. I used to do costumes professionally. But now now my main job is arts and events coordinating, which does involve a lot of sewing and a lot of craft workshops, but the kind of events management side of it is more what my day job is.
How did you get into that kind of work?
Many years ago, I studied costume design at university. I went to London College of Fashion and I did the costume design course that they do there. So that's where I sort of learned how to do sewing. And what's lovely about it is, unlike a fashion course, had I been studying fashion design, the costume course is, like, particularly the one that we do in London, is very focused on historical sewing techniques. Yeah, a lot of my teachers were kind of like people that had been making opera costumes for, decades and decades. So there was a huge focus on historical dressmaking, and that is kind of actually what got me. I was actually into making costumes before I got into Lolita fashion. When I discovered classic Lolita, I realized that this was very much, in tune with my love of pretty historical fashion. So I fell in love with classic Lolita in a big, big way after I finished university. I'm just going to do the next step. So don't worry if you've not got this to this point yet, because I'm a pretty quick sewer. But so I've now got my 5 petals all side by side, fanned out along this. Hey, I can see someone saying another fellow classic Lolita. Hello, hello. Hey. You look so glamorous. Wax Poetic Shop. That is a seriously glamorous photo you've got there. I was thinking of wearing a beret and I realized I didn't have a beret. I have like about 20 berets, but did I have a beret in the right color for this outfit? No, I'm sure you can all feel my pain. We've all been there. So I've, as I said, I've got my 5 little petals side by side. And as you can see, I said this was horrible fray fabric. It's looking pretty tufty. I call these pig's ears. I don't know if there's a technical term, but there's all kinds of fluffy pig's ears sticking up here. Now, at this point, what I would normally do, because I tend to do this craft with fabrics that fray really badly, at this point here, I like to give my little pig's ears a bit of a haircut and just tidy up some of those loose threads. Have to be quite careful because obviously I don't want to cut through any of my stitches because I don't want the whole thing to come undone. But at this point, I can just, with a little pair of scissors, just carefully trim off some of those little fluffy bits that are looking a bit untidy. So that's a bit neated out. Tidy up all my hair cuttings into the bin. Okay, so now, I didn't realize I put both me and my wife in berries for our panel until later. Yay, beret love. It is beret season. All the berries have been, I don't know if berries are an international trend, but I know in London, the kind of quirky fashionistas love their berries. All the kind of London Instagrammers that are really into fashion do tend to wear a lot of berets in the winter. Okay, so I've got my 5 side by side, and I'm now just going to literally do a couple of stitches to join the first one onto the last one. So again, the lovely thing about this is all of these stitches, it doesn't matter if your stitching's a bit messy, because all of this is going to be hidden in the middle of the flower, and we're going to stick beads and buttons over the top of it. So if you're feeling like it's going a bit messy, do not worry. All these sins will be hidden at the end. So that's what makes it a very good project for beginners and for people that aren't maybe very confident at sewing. So I'm now going to trim that off. I've joined them together. So I've got my first little 5-point flower. Now, what often happens is with these, you end up with a little bit of a hole. I'm going to see if I can poke my finger through the hole. Oh yeah, there you go. You end up with a little bit of a hole in the middle of your flower. Oh, everyone's now rushing off to get berets. How lovely. Hopefully Cos is off to get a beret. Excellent. Go for it. Yeah, you might end up with a little bit of a hole in the middle. If that's the case, like, don't worry. We're gonna, great, it's coming together. That's what I like to hear. Well done. So I'm now gonna, don't worry if you've got a bit of a hole in the middle, because we're gonna get to that later on. So I'm just gonna plow straight into doing the second one now. So I'm cutting myself another bit of thread. You know what, actually, last one I did with white thread, so you guys could see what I'm doing, but this one I'm going to do with red, just so that I can actually use this for more than just a demonstration piece. So I'm now swapped to a red thread. I think you'll still be able to see it on camera. We'll see how we do when I get going. So I'm starting again from scratch. So if anyone's joined in late, don't worry, you're going to get to see all of this a few times over. Okay, so triangle, you take your square, you start with a square, you're going to fold it in half to make a triangle. You're going to then fold it in half again to make a smaller triangle, so that all your raw edges are stacked up on top of each other across the top. So you've got 4 raw edges all along the top, and then the bottom 2 sides are the folded edges. Then you're going to grab your needle and thread that's got a knot in the end of the thread, and you're going to do a running stitch across the top edge, across all of those the 4 raw edges. Running stitch across those. Don't make it too small. Big stitches is good. I normally do about 5 stitches, I'd say, across the top. There we go. And you can actually, I think you can actually just about see my stitches there. So I've got like about 5 stitches across the top. And then I'm going to pull my thread, gather it up, and do a few more little stitches. to just hold a few tiny stitches on top of each other to just hold those gathers together. So there we go, one petal. And now I keep the thread attached. So I've got a little petal on the end of my thread. And I'm going to jump straight into doing the next one. So again, just folding my squares.
Dang it.
How you doing, Haley?
Oh, fine. It's just I have like the striped fabric, so there's like a right side and a wrong side to my petals, and one of them got twisted around, but I'm just gonna stitch that in.
Ah, you know what? That's something I hadn't mentioned before. So I'm using fabric that's the same on both sides. But if you are using a fabric that's got a pattern on one side, you've probably worked this out already, but when you fold your square, you want to make sure that the wrong side is all hidden inside the folds. So it should be the right side of your fabric on the front and the back of your triangles.
It's just that when you do a stripe, it'll end up with one being like horizontal or up and down, and so you want to be...
Yes. Oh, yes, I understand what you mean. Yeah. Oh, so you're using a stripy fabric for this?
I am using a very subtle sheer stripe.
Oh, can you hold it up to camera and see? Hold up your flowers so we can try and see what effect.
It's very, very subtle. So these are all going, I guess, around this way.
It is. I can see it quite well on the flat one in your palm, but once it's all gathered up, because
it's very hard to see, but I noticed it, and it was going to drive me crazy, so I had to turn the one petal around.
Yeah, but that sort of sheer fabric is definitely a good kind of fabric to use for this activity. All those sort of super fine flimsy materials are perfect for this.
I love this particular fabric because it's actually quite starched, even though it's quite thin. So it'll hold a crease really nicely.
That is, Haley does have lovely fabric. I just spotted because there seems to be there's a lot of beret love going on here at the moment, because we mentioned berets, and obviously we've hit an area of passion for a lot of people. What's this? Miss Carol Bell, a sewing legend. Hello. Says no one else will notice our own glaring mistakes. I know this deal. Yes, there you go. And empathy with you, Haley. No, if you hadn't told us, none of us would have known.
I know, but I would have known, and I would have told myself. But I intend to go the opposite with the one on top, so that when they're together, it's like a fun textural situation. Yeah.
I think textury type fabrics are a great way of just adding, more, even if it's all the same color. Someone says we've got a little bee pattern going on us. Oh, that sounds like it must be maybe a printed cotton that they're using, I'm guessing. With
That'd be cute. I think it would be really cute, like a candy stripe.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. I almost always make these with plain color fabrics. But then whenever I do workshops, loads of people use lovely printed fabrics, and their flowers look so jolly, and I get quite jealous, and I always think, should I be using? But I guess my logic is I'm normally, when I'm kind of what's called, if there is such a thing, I'm a bit of a less is more Lolita. I know that probably is hard to believe because I've got like various things going on here in my hair. But when it comes to making accessories, I normally try and make my accessories just one color, or predominantly one color. So like, for example, the red flowers here, they've got some green leaves and some gold centers, but predominantly it's a red decoration. And my hairband I'm making, you can see it's kind of got snowflakes on. That's all white. And I tend to make accessories, and I try and make them just one color. And I do this because I find it's much easier to put together an outfit, to like add the various elements together if you've just got one color. If you make a hair accessory that's got like 4 very specific colors in it to match a dress, you're only going to be able to wear that hair accessory, chances are, with that one dress. And so because I like to, I like my wardrobe to I like to work my wardrobe quite hard. So I tend to make accessories in one overall color, just so that it's easier to match them with more things. And if I was wearing an outfit like today, where I've kind of got blue and red and white going on, then I might use a red and a white hair accessory. But that's just a little thing I do when I'm crafting. And it means that all the pieces I make are quite easy for me to wear with different outfits. So that's a good tip. Right, I've got my 5 petals again, all side by side. I've got all kinds of little tufty bits going on. So it is haircut time. I'm going to give it a little haircut. Right, all trimmed off and nice and tidy now. Okay, right, and the rough ends in the bin.
I'm regretting forgetting to wax my thread.
You know, I did this workshop earlier on today, actually, and somebody was saying that their thread was snapping quite a lot whilst they were doing it, which when you're doing all 5 petals together can obviously be really frustrating. So if you find that that's happening, you can either double up your thread, use double thread so it's a bit stronger, or you can wax your thread. Or what you can do is you could like make 5 separate, if you just find your thread keeps breaking, you can actually just make 5 separate petals and attach them all to each other later on.
I'm just getting knots in my thread sometimes, which is slowing me down.
Okay, so I've now got, don't worry if you're not at this stage yet, because I've made literally thousands of these, so I'm pretty speedy. But I'm going to keep rattling through because there's a lot of little techniques I want to show you. And in the hour and a half that we've got, there is no way you're going to have time to make a finished one of these in an hour and a half, unless you're some like absolute sewing whiz. But what I will do is I'm going to make sure I'm going to show you all the techniques you need to know in order to be able to make the whole selection of this. So we're now about half an hour in. So in about 10 minutes time, I'll probably move on to the little dangling flowers. But for now, we're going to stick on these little star flowers. Someone's recommending Magic Thread conditioner. I have heard of that. It sounds like a really good product. I know it's very popular with quilters, isn't it? Yes, I've definitely heard of Thread Magic before. So I've got my 2 flowers here. And this is the point where, you know, we talked about how you might end up with a bit of a hole in the middle. Particularly if you're using a slightly stiff fabric, you might find you've got quite a big hole in the middle. What I do now, when I've got my 2, so only one side of these flowers is going to be the front. So, but you've got 4 sides to choose from. So what I normally do now is I'll normally look at both my flowers, turn them over, decide which side is the best and the neatest looking, and that's going to be the front of my flower. So all the other bits can be a bit messy because they're going to be hidden. We only need one side to look neat and tidy, and even then we don't need it to be that neat and tidy because we're going to cover it up with beads and buttons. So I'm going to use this as my front. So what I'm going to do now is I've still got a bit of a hole in the middle. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to just do a few more stitches, kind of maybe going around in a circle in the middle, or a few stitches like across, a bit like a cross stitch, and just pull those up to like pull the petals closer together. This is the most, I really feel like I'm on QVC or something today. This is I've never done a Twitch type workshop before, and I'm really getting sort of full on Blue Peter presenter vibes going on. Do you guys in the States know what Blue Peter is? Have you heard of Blue Peter?
The only reason I've heard of that is from have you ever heard of the game called Boulder Dash?
Yes.
Yeah. That's not a phrase we have commonly here. So
Blue Peter is a very nostalgic BBC. You heard of the BBC? I'm sure you've all heard of the BBC. It's a BBC children's program with presenters, and it's been running since the 1950s, and it's still going. And it's a bit of a kind of real, you know, childhood memory for a lot of people. But they always do craft activities, and for anyone that loves doing crafts, your perfect grown-up job would be to be a Blue Peter presenter and just get to do.
Sorry about the road noise.
I feel like I'm living out my Blue Peter presenter aspirations right now.
Sorry. I can't help the motorcyclists.
Oh, that's I couldn't hear them. Don't worry. So I've literally just, while we've been talking, I've just been doing a few stitches in the center. Are you taking those stitches to close the hole on the back side? I'm actually just going backwards and forwards through both sides. I'm just kind of, it doesn't really matter as long as it looks neat on one side. You just do your stitches to get it kind of nice and tidy in the middle. So I've just done a load of stitches, and I don't know if you can see, compared, there you go. That's the one with the bigger hole in the middle. And this is the one where I've done some more stitches, and it's just kind of tightened up the center to make it nice and tidy. Right, so I'm just going to do a couple of stitches on the back just to stop those from coming undone. You may have noticed I haven't actually rethreaded my needle yet. I'm still using the same bit of thread I had at the beginning when I first started doing this particular flower. So I've still got my thread attached. This is the front of my flower, and I've got the thread coming out of the back of my flower now. And I'm now going to stack my flowers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the top one on top of the second one, and obviously arrange it so that your petals are showing in between each other. So you're going to have 10 petals altogether, and you want the back petals to be in the gaps between the front 5 petals. And then just holding that in place with my fingers, I'm just going to push my needle through the back layer. And then I'm just going to do, it can get a bit fiddly because sometimes you might find your thread catches round your petals as you're pulling it. But don't worry, that's very normal. So I'm now just going to do some big stitches through all the layers. And I'm just sewing the top flower onto the bottom one so they're all securely attached. Now, if at some point you run out of thread, don't worry, just, finish off with a couple of stitches to make a knot and start up again with a new piece of thread. So I'm just stitching backwards and forwards. I'm just going all the way from the front to the back, staying in the middle, kind of loosely going around in a circle so that it's all nice and securely attached to each. I probably do slightly more stitches than I actually need to, but that's because I'm doing this sort of as a hobby. If you were a professional maker making these professionally, you'd probably master knowing the minimum number of stitches you need to do to get this to work. So there we go. Oh, so many threads. I knew this was horrible fabric when I started, but it is a very jolly red. Okay, so I've now got a little 10 petaled flower. You can kind of wiggle. If you are not that keen on sewing, for this you kind of, once you've actually gathered up your petals, you could actually just get a glue gun and glue the top flower onto the bottom flower. When I do this with kids, that's what I tend to do because it's just nice and quick, and also it means that one of the nice trick about using glue for this is because the glue stays warm for a couple of seconds before it sets, you can kind of wiggle all the leaves. I kind of, even when I'm stitching, I do this, kind of wiggle all the leaves to kind of arrange them all nicely so they're fanning out nicely. So now I'm at the point where I can add a center to my flower. So there's all kinds of things you can do for this. I'm going to show you a few examples I've done already. So I've mentioned before, I love using little bells. I think they just are lovely and Christmassy and jingly. And that's really nice, particularly if you're doing the red and gold sort of Christmas version. Other things you can use is I've used a couple of pearls there for that one. This one's got a little collection of different beads all mixed together. And you can even use just like buttons as well. Some of you might have, but everyone's got buttons, haven't they? This one here is actually, I'm making a whole set of these because I've always said this would look lovely just done with bed sheets and leftover shirt buttons. And I thought I'd better actually make one with bed sheets and leftover shirt buttons to illustrate the point. I'm very big on the idea that you don't need to go out and spend loads of money on materials to do crafting. You can use, you know, just leftover scraps of fabric, whatever you happen to have lying around, random buttons, beads, little bells. Yeah, just work with what you've got, basically. Now I've got, there we go. I'll bring over a little, I've got my tray of pretty things here. How delicious. So I've got a whole load of buttons here. I also happened across some little star buttons, which I thought were quite nice and Christmassy. So I'm going to use those, I think, for this video. But I've got different colour pearls. I've got rhinestones. If anyone has any rhinestones, you could use those in the centre. Also, I feel like rhinestones and sequins are the kind of things that you sometimes might have off like an old item of clothing. You might have like a jumper that's worn out and you can remove. I've got a whole load of bells in here, and I've got surprise bells. Now, I asked you on you get lint. Do you get lint chocolate bunnies in America? I know in Europe we all have lint chocolate bunnies all the time. I think you probably do. But when you get a lint chocolate bunny, they always come with a little bell tied around their neck. They go classic Andy, say yes, and we always create the scrap, great for craft like this. So Christmas, any Christmas craft, if you ever get any little bells and things, this is the perfect thing to use them for. And also, I know last year in the UK, we were also selling lint chocolate reindeers, which came with these kind of bells on them. So cute, and again, very Christmassy, so a lovely thing to use. And I know they also do teddy bears, I think, too, and they normally have like a little heart that's red and gold. So save those little charms. This is a great activity to add them to. And then I've also got like my random jar of white shirt buttons, which I was using earlier on. Okay, I'm going to move those back out the way, and I am going to. I judged my length of thread well. I've got enough thread on the back of this to add my to add this button on. So I'm doing a little star-shaped button because I think that's not. I think a little wooden star is very Christmassy. Going for a bit of sort of Scandi vibe, I think. Red and wood colours feels a bit Scandinavian to me. And definitely these kind of wooden buttons definitely give it that kind of like homemade country Christmas kind of. That is my the girls that know me well know my sort of style of choice is I would kind of put myself down as being a classic country Lolita. I'm definitely classic, but I don't tend to go for that kind of really opulent special occasion classic. It's more of a kind of everyday classic Lolita kind of. I'm also into natural K. I have I don't know if any of the girls who did the natural K workshop, the panel at Grammar A are listening, but if you are a huge fan, I thought it was great. That was a brilliant talk, and it was really interesting.
I went and got my beeswax this time.
Oh, well done. Yeah, beeswax, a very good idea.
Because I'm going to do sequins with a seed bead, so I got to have a very fine needle here.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, thin needles. Yeah, you might find you need a few different size needles for this activity.
Ooh, that one's broken, actually. The eye is broken.
So there we have it. That is my first little flower finished. And what I will do is obviously I'll make 3 of these. Well, I'm going to turn it into one of these hair accessories like what I'm wearing at the moment, but I'll make 3 of these all the same. So you are going to need, if you want to make a big ornament with lots of elements to it, you are going to need to cut out a lot of squares because for each flower you need 10 squares. So if you want to make 3 flowers, that's 30 plus however many squares you need for the dangles as well. So you're looking at probably around about 40 little 2-inch squares to make a full one of these ornaments that I'm wearing. So there you go. That's how you do the Kanzashi flower. And obviously the leaves are exactly the same, made in the same way, just with one square on its own as we did before. And if you just want to do one on your, if you're just doing one flower on its own, Haley, I like your Star Wars sweater. Did we get a peek of Haley's Star Wars sweater?
You can see my sleeves.
Ah!
Got a holiday Christmas Star Wars sweater I bought from the men's department of Target a few years ago.
Excellent.
And I thought, why the boys get all the good stuff? I don't understand.
I'll be honest, I'm the same. I tend to buy, I love wearing, when I'm not wearing Lolita, I love wearing just massive jumpers, just as dresses, really comfy. Especially this year, because let's face it, I've barely left the house. So it's basically been pajamas for a whole year. So all about the leggings and the big jumpers. And I love just going to, we don't have Target in the UK, but we have a Primark, which I think originally was an Irish company. So we have Primark, and I always just go to Primark and buy like the really big men's jumpers and wear those as sweaters. I also think they're really good fun. Like if you don't want to get dressed up in full Lolita, but you still want to look cute and you want to be really comfortable, I just put on a really big men's jumper as a dress. And then I basically just pile on a beret and a load of cute accessories and brooches. And you've got like a super kind of cute J fashion-y sort of, but really comfy outfit to wear. Okay, I'm just bringing in a few more of these. So if you're wanting to just do something simple and a bit smaller, here you can see there's an example of just, these are just little ones. So it's just one double flower with the 10 petals. And then I like to do these with 3 little leaves. I kind of do 2 on one side and 1 on the other. And I've done quite a lot of these. They're just nice little quick things to make, and you can turn them into, this one's a brooch, this one's a hair clip. Now, you know, I said about it doesn't matter if they're messy in the middle because you can just cover it up. So this one here, you can see there's quite a lot of beads in the center of this, and that's because it didn't go quite as neatly as I wanted it to. So I just covered it with lots of pretty gold stuff. No one will ever know. So if it's looking a bit messy in the middle, just like pile on more sparkles, cover them up. It'll look really cute. Oh, someone's saying they look really cute, pretty. Oh, thank you. Yay. Amazing. Okay, so I'm now going to move on to showing you quickly how to do your dangling flowers. So these are a slightly different technique. Again, they are done with squares. So I'm going to just pull in. This is just a little chain of dangling flowers on its own. And these are really lovely, like as I've done them, kind of dangling on a little hair accessory. But there's lots of other things you can do. So you could make like a few of these and put them on your Christmas tree. I could easily make loads of these and hang them all over my Christmas tree, and it would be like little tumbling flowers. It'd be really pretty. In Japan, you see these done a lot in shades of purple to create dangling wisteria mobiles, which look beautiful. This is another classic example of that Japanese sort of art practice where you do one thing that's very simple and then you multiply it loads of times and you get something that's really intricate and really fancy. But essentially, it's still a really simple technique at the start. So the other things you can do with these, which I wanted to show you, which is slightly more wearable, but I think it's worth showing. It's really lovely. It's very Christmassy. You can also use these little flowers and throw them all together, back to back, to make little baubles like this. And if you wanted to wear this as a hair accessory, you could maybe, like, you know, for a very Japanese look, you could have like one of these hanging off a chopstick stuck into a bun or something like that. But they definitely do use these as hair accessories. But I first came across these when I was researching tsurushibina, which are the mobiles that they make out of fabric for the Japanese doll festival that happens every year. And this is one of the very popular kind of more simple fabric-based ornaments that they make. And it's all made out of squares. It's basically origami with fabric, as is all this. So that's a little one. If you want to make a really huge one, now there is a polystyrene ball hidden in the middle of this, as I'm sure you can imagine. But this is just loads of those little flowers all together to make a really nice big Christmas bauble, and they look really fancy. And when I was making this, How fun. Yay, thank you. I think they're very fun. When I was making this, it was quite funny. I'll tell you this because it was ever so slightly inappropriate, but rather amusing. When I was making this, I had loads of pins stuck all over this, holding all the flowers in place. And I showed some people in a workshop and they were like, so you're making the coronavirus as a Christmas tree decoration? That was not my intention, but...
This is not what we were going for, no.
Not what I was going for, but very topical for this year. So yes, if you want to make one of these, you could easily make it look like the coronavirus if you wanted to, as a sort of memorable Christmas decoration. I'm not sure everyone would enjoy having that on their tree, but yeah, that is one thing you can do with it. So I'm going to show you how to make these little dangling flowers. So we are again going to start off with a square. So if you're still making flowers, just pause for a second, grab another little square. And you're also definitely going to need some pins. So you also want to have some pins handy for this. So with our little square, we're not making triangles this time. We're keeping our edges all straight and square and rectangular. What we're going to do is you're going to fold the two sides into the middle. So I'm going to fold one edge into the middle and the other side into the middle so that they're touching. The raw edges are touching in the center of your piece of fabric. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some little pins. And this is going to look a bit weird, but I put the pins in the center at right angles to the fabric. And you'll understand why we have to pin it that way in a minute. I'm going to turn it around, same on the other side. So I'll just hold it up so you can see. So I folded my two edges into the middle, and I've got my pins at right angles. Then I'm going to do exactly the same again, but with the other two edges. I'm going to fold them into the middle and put pins in, again, in the center of each side. So I'm going to fold this edge into the middle. So all your raw edges are being folded into the center of your fabric. How are you following on all right, Hayley? Is this making sense?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, and then I've done the other side too. I'm just going to hold it with my fingers, grab another pin and push this in like that. So I have something that looks like this.
Square.
Yeah. So on one side, all the folds are on one side. And if you flip it over onto the back, it's just the flat fabric with folded edges on all four sides. Okay, I'll do this again in a minute, just in case anyone wants to watch that process again. I'm now going to grab from somewhere a needle and thread. I'm definitely using a contrasting thread for this. Obviously, I recommend you use a thread that matches. How am I doing time-wise? We've got about 40 minutes. Is that right? That's good. That's good. Good, good, good. Right. Where's my needle? Okay. Needle and thread. I am going to double up my thread for this, just because I want it to be nice and strong, and I want you guys to be able to see my stitches very clearly. Okay, so I'm using black, so you can see what I'm doing. Black needle and thread. What I'm going to do now is I've got a knot on the end of my thread. I want to bury that knot, so it's not going to be visible. So what I'm going to do is try and hold the camera. I'm going to lift up one of the folds slightly. I'm going to take my needle under that fold and bring it out next to the pin. You can see that. Next to the pin in the middle of one side. And I'm going to pull the thread through. So you can see there, I've got my thread coming out of the middle of one of my folded sides. And the knot on the end of the thread has now got buried underneath the folded fabric, so no one's going to be able to see the knot. Now what I'm going to do is I've got my thread coming out the edge. I'm now going to go up just in the same spot, kind of on the other side of the pin, but still in the middle. I'm going to bring my needle up next to it again. So I've just done another little tiny stitch there. If I turn over on the back, you see I don't know if you can see, but there's a little stitch on the edge of the folded fabric. So, okay, I'm looking at the side with all my pins and my folds on. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a big stitch across diagonally to the next pin on the next folded edge. Now, this might look a little confusing while I'm doing it, but when I've finished, I'll show you and it'll all make sense. So I've done a big stitch across from one pin to the next pin and through to the back. Then I'm going to bring my needle up. And when you're doing this, you want to try and catch all the raw edges, all the corners of your folded edges in these stitches that you're doing. So my thread's now coming out the back. I'm going to bring it back up to the front, again staying in the middle of that folded edge. Just bring it up on the other side of that pin. And I'm going to try and, I'm on a bit where there's a little raw corner. I'm going to catch that little raw corner of the fabric as I come back up. And then I'm going to do another, and we just keep doing that around the circle. So on a diagonal, over to the next pin, through to the back, then back up again, kind of in the same spot in the middle, but just on the other side of the pin. And then again, diagonally round, and just you keep doing that all the way around until you get back to where you started. And you try at all times, you try to do these stitches through all 4 layers of the folded fabric. Now, obviously on the corners, we're right on the corner of the raw edge of the fabric. So if it pulls out, don't worry, it's all going to get pulled up and folded and all those raw edges will be hidden. So don't worry if it's not quite perfect. There you go. So I'm back around to the start again. So there you go. You can see what I've got. Hopefully that made sense. So I've got my 4 diagonal stitches going round. And at this point, all the stitches are holding all the layers together. So I can now pull out my pins, put them on my pin cushion so you can see what it is. So I've got my 4 big stitches going across each corner. If I turn it over onto the back, you can see I've got in the middle of each side, I've got a tiny little stitch visible. It's very visible because I've done it in black. But yeah, you should have a little tiny stitch in the middle of each side all the way around. Okay, and this is where the magic happens. This is the clever bit. I did this with some children, and when I did this, they were like, wow. Okay, now you're going to take your thread. What I do is I just, in the middle of your sort of diamond of stitching, I just tend to push it down a little in the middle with my finger, just to kind of get a bit of a dent going on. And then you're going to pull up your thread, and it will all gather up and bring the sides together, and it pulls up into a little 4-petaled flower. This is the bit where all children go, wow, wow. Yeah, the magic of origami. Yeah. Okay, so you end up with a little, wow, yay, great, thank you guys, I love the comments. You end up with a little 4-petaled flower that looks like that. Okay, and so it's kind of, so if I turn it the other way up, you can see you've got that little kind of triangle flower shape going on, and you've got your 4 little petals. So that's how you make your little 4-petaled flower. And as I said, you can make lots of them and sew them all together to make a little ball like this, or you can do what we're doing at the moment and turn them into little dangling flowers that you can add onto a hair accessory. So I've got my little thread, still poking. Obviously, I need to secure this. All the raw edges are now folded up inside the flower. So all the raw edge fluffy bits are all hidden. So it's all very tidy and neat. So I'm now just going to do a few little stitches to secure it. And at this point, if you wanted to, depending on what you're using the flower for, you could also sew a little bead on. So if you are turning it into something like this, you can see each of my little flowers has a little bead sewn in the middle. So if you were doing that, you could sew a little bead in the middle at this point. But I'm going to put mine on a little dangling chain. So I'm not going to sew beads into the middle of these at the moment, because they're all going to be threaded on a chain. So I've just done a few little stitches on top of each other, just so that it doesn't come undone. I'm just gonna push my needle up through the flower, and then I'll cut my thread off so that the thread end is tucked inside the flower, hidden away. And there you go. That is one of our little. It is so cute. Someone's saying it's so cute. It is very cute. Very cute. Everything should be cute. More cuteness in the world. There you go. So that's how you do the little flowers. I'm going to do another one quickly, just in case anyone missed that. If you guys are having a go and you're making yourself some dangling flowers, keep going and make a few more. So I'm going to grab another. So just in case anyone wants to see that again, I'll rattle through it again quickly. We've got your square. You're going to fold the two outer sides in, two sides come folded in into the middle so that they're touching. So you've got your two edges folded up, meeting in the middle. And then I put little pins in just at right angles in the center to hold those folded edges in. Just holding it with my fingers as I put the pins in. There we go. Okay, I'll hold that up to camera so you can see. There you are. Two pins at right angles. Someone's saying, I've done a lot of sewing, but never anything like this. I love it. Wonderful. Great. I thought this might be a nice one because it's sort of not, it's these sort of Kanzashi techniques aren't something everyone's necessarily come across before. So I thought it'd be a nice one to do because I figured there might be a few people that hadn't done this previously. And it's a great lockdown craft because there's no fancy materials needed. You can literally just use little scraps of fabric. Whatever little scraps of fabric you've got lying around the house. So there's no need to go out and buy anything special because that's the way I like to craft. All about using things that you're just easy to get hold of, materials you might have already. Okay, so I've just, oh, sorry, I didn't talk through that, but what I did there is so I went from having my rectangle like this, and then I fold the other two edges into the middle as well. So they are also meeting in the center, two edges. So you've basically reduced your little square down into a kind of smaller folded up square by folding in all the sides evenly into the center. So you get something like this. Oh, sorry, was someone saying something?
Oh no, I was saying I did it.
Yay, well done. Hayley, show us what you've got. How are yours getting on? I can see a lovely finished flower there.
Here's my flower with some sequins.
I love the sequins. That's so pretty.
I've got a lot. I've got a giant bag of gold sequins.
There was no such thing as too many sequins.
Yeah, I love to do like different shapes. So the ones on here are flower shaped. So I've got loads of them.
Lovely. Someone's saying they're using these flowers for earrings. That is such a lovely idea. If you want a challenge, you could try and do really tiny ones to make earrings. That would be really beautiful. Show us your little folded flower.
I've got one little guy.
Yeah, that looks good. Perfect. Yeah. They are nice because they look a bit fiddly, but they're actually not, once you kind of learn how to do it, the little trick, they're quite simple. Okay, so I've got mine folded up like this. So as you see, I've got the four edges all folded in, and I'm going to flip it over onto the back, and you can see, so on the back, it's all smooth with folded edges on the four sides. And then on this side, I've got it all folded into the middle and held in place with pins. And now I'm going to do my sewing. So I've got my needle thread using black so that you can see the stitches really clearly. So I'm going to, in order to bury the knot that's at the end of my thread, I'm going to go and stitch underneath one of these folded edges. So I'm going to put my needle under there, and I'm going to bring it out next to the pin in one of the folded edges. In the middle of the folded edge, I'm going to bring it out. So I'll pull that out so you can see I've now got my thread coming out of the middle of one of the edges of my square. And then I'm just going to do a little stitch up from the bottom to the top next to that pin. Then I'm going to start stitching around diagonally. So we're doing big diagonal stitches across to the next pin on the next folded side. So I'm going to go across here, I'm going to go down through all 4 layers of fabric, kind of catching the corner of that little folded over edge through to the back. So I've got a nice big diagonal stitch going across to the next one. Then I'm going to come up almost on the same spot. I'm going to come up on the other side of the pin on that edge. So I'm still in the middle of, and I'm going to make sure I catch all 4 layers. I didn't quite catch all 4 layers of fabric there. So I'm going to make sure I've caught all 4 layers of my fabric when I come back up. And then I'm going to do the next big diagonal stitch over to the next folded edge, like that, and then back up again on the other side of the pin. So still staying in the middle of that edge of the fabric. And I'll just keep working my way around like that, doing diagonal stitches across to the next side, through to the back, and then up again, just on the other side of the pin, but kind of staying in the same spot, making sure I'm always catching all 4 layers of fabric. Now, if your fabric frays out on the corner, it doesn't matter too much. Don't worry, because we're going to draw it all up and all the raw edges are going to be hidden anyway. So don't panic if your fabric is fraying and your stitches are pulling out when you do this. So there we go. So I'm back round to where I started. So I've got 4 big diagonal stitches going across all my corners. Take my pins out so you can see, because it's all stitched in place, so I can take my pins out now. There we are. So that's what it looks like on the front with 4 big diagonal stitches. And if I show you what the back looks like, you'll see that I have basically a little stitch on each edge there. 1 little stitch on each edge, in the middle of each edge. And then we do the magic bit again. We pull up your drawstring, pushing it down in the middle with your thumb as you do it, just to help it out. Pull up the drawstring, and it all pulls up into a little pyramid of a flower with 4 petals. And all the raw edges are folded up and hidden inside, so it's all very neat and tidy, which is how we like things. Certainly how I like things. I love finishing things off nicely. I'm all about, you know, my overlockers and my French seams, and I like finishing seam allowances with lace sometimes too. If I've got some spare lace lying around, I'll get all fancy and do finished edge seams. But I love having all the raw edges hidden, and it really neat and tidy. There we go. So I've just done a few little stitches in the middle there just to hold it all together. If you want to add a bead at this point, you could add a bead. But if you're doing dangling flowers, you probably don't want to add a bead because you're going to have threads going through this later on. So I've just done a few little stitches to kind of act as a knot to hold it all together. And then I'm going to just push my needle up inside the flower just to bury the end of the thread and then cut it off. And that's how you make the little dangling flowers. I've also seen these done where someone's saying this is a great panel. Thank you so much. Yay. I'm glad you're all enjoying it. I love doing it. This is basically what I do as a job. This is my, it's the most amazing job, isn't it? I'm a very lucky girl. I'm a very, very lucky girl. So yeah, that's how you do this. But I've also seen these done very large. I've seen people, I've seen some Japanese ornaments where they've made these out of quite big squares of really beautiful patterned Japanese fabric to make like quite a large triangular hanging ornament that maybe then hangs up on a beautiful cord with like a lovely big tassel out the bottom. If you wanted to kind of showcase a you know, really beautiful fabric and turn it into something that was quite, you know, like I want to say angular, like a sort of, because these are sort of, you know, they're a kind of, you know, triangular square shape. So if you wanted a sort of dramatic angular shape to make into something to really show off the fabric, that would be a nice way of doing it. So now I'm just eagerly watching the time because I know there's more exciting panels coming up, so I can't afford to overrun. I'm now going to jump into showing you guys how I would put all of these things together to make a lovely hair ornament like the one I'm wearing here. I'll start off by talking about the dangling flower. So you want obviously some sort of string to put your dangling flower on. Now here I used a bit of, this is I think a bit of red crochet cotton that I have. On these other ones I made, I've again used crochet cotton, but depending on what kind of cotton you have, you might not have something thick enough. Now, I always, I'm always, if I can avoid going to the shops to buy something for a project, I will do. I will find a way to make what I already have work so that I don't have to go shopping. Miss Carol saying, that's so pretty. Yes, this is, so yes, if anyone missed the beginning, these are what we're making here. So this is what you can turn this all into. And I'm also wearing a little red one here as well that's very Christmassy. And they do, if you make them in red and green, they look just like poinsettia. So they're really lovely and festive. So to avoid having to go to the shops, if you do not have the right sort of thickness of thread, if this is for any project where you need something kind of like a piece of cord, if you need cord, so if you're making any sort of dangling ornament or a mobile, you might need some kind of cord to use. And if you haven't got cord that's thick enough, which in this case I didn't have, you can just find some other cord that's, if you've got something the right color, you can always just like plait thinner threads together to make a thicker cord, or you can twist them together to make a little kind of twisted rope. I've got a few other things here. So here I've got some baker's twine, very popular for Christmas present wrapping. You might thought that might be really fun if you're doing a really Christmassy one. I actually think when I do this sort of Scandinavian themed one that I'm doing with my like wooden button in the middle, I might use some baker's twine because I feel like that's the similar kind of concept and I want it to be really Christmassy. So you could use something like that, or I've got a few other kind of, these are just crochet cottons that I pick up from thrift shops and charity shops. In the UK, we call them charity shops, not thrift shops. Generally, thrift shops is definitely an American term. I always watch your thrift shop finds with envy. You seem to have much cooler things turning up in your thrift shops than we do here.
I have another technique for those of you who've been trying to make thicker thread.
Yeah? Go on, share.
Have you ever done like hand crocheting of thread?
Ah, what? So you could just crochet a chain to make a thick
you can crochet a chain.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I've also got here, oh, my phone has just started talking to me, which means my headphones have stopped working. Hang on, let me just, oh, we've lost Jessica. No, come back. Oh, no. Oh, that's annoying. Okay. Okay. I think, you know what, it's going to take me a load of faffing around to get that connected up again. So I'm just going to show you all on camera here, and I'll just hold things up and we'll make it work just fine. Because it's going to take me 5 minutes to set that up again. I'd rather just focus on giving you guys more instructions. Okay, so I also had some, this is just a buttonhole thread. So it's a very thicker cotton thread. So you could use something like that. And what I do here, I've got, this is some very thin crochet cotton, and to make it thicker so that I can make a little string for my dangling flowers to go on, I'm basically rolling it in my fingers. So one hand's rolling in one direction and the other hand is rolling in the opposite direction. And what happens, I'm putting tension on it while I do it. And what happens is, what it's going to want to, can you see what's happening? It's going to want to twist up on itself, and it doubles up into a kind of double twisted cord that's double the thickness. And so if you wanted it to be even thicker, you could, use 2 bits of thread and twist it up, and you'd end up with a piece of cord that was 4 times thicker. So that's another option. So I've actually done one of those already. So I'm going to show you how I make that. Where is it? So I'm going to do, for the ones on my hair accessories, I've done this. I'll take this off and show it to you guys. This has got little, I've just put some little bells on the bottom. Now, the other one I was showing before, this example, this has actually got some little beads in between each little flower, which is another quite pretty thing you can do. Are you doing, so Hayley's doing are you doing like the crochet but just with your fingers? Yeah. like you do. Carol Bell's mentioned swing tags. Yeah, and I learned to do those. So that it's the same as if you were crocheting with a crochet hook, but basically you just like pull a loop through a loop through a loop. Like it's like finger knitting as well. But that's another way to make a little sort of thicker chain that could make a good cord for this. So I've got, this is a bit of doubled up twisted thread that I made before. And I'm now going to start threading on some of my little flowers. So what I'm going to do is, again, I want to bury the knot that's in the end. So I'm actually going to start off by sewing into the flower. Sewing into the flower. So I'm basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bury my knot in amongst the petals. So it's hidden inside the flower. And I've come up, it's actually upside down at the moment. And that's because the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add on a little bell that's going to be right at the bottom of my dangling flower chain. So it's coming up through the bottom. So what I've done is I've sort of buried the knot inside the flower when I attached this cord. So now I'm going to grab, I'm putting a little jingly bell. You could use, if you've got bells, you could use bells. If you've got like a bigger bell off a Lint Easter bunny, as we talked about earlier on, you could put a big bell on the bottom of your dangling flower. That would be a really nice place to put a larger bell if you had one. So I've thread my little bell on, and then I'm basically going to then stitch up through the flower and come out the top where the flower stem is going to start. So this is going to be the bottom flower on my dangling flower chain. There we go. So you can see what's going on. It's just like that. So I've got a little bell on the bottom and the thread is coming up through the top. I'm just going to move this one. Thread coming up through the top. What I'm going to do now is, obviously, I think it looks nice if you have all your little flowers spaced apart a bit. Mine are all about, for this scale, so this design is done with 2-inch squares, and my little flowers, my dangling flowers, were also made with 2-inch squares. I have these about 0.5 centimetre apart each. So what I do to keep them all separated 0.5 centimetre apart, you want to do a little knot on your thread that's going to become a little stopper to stop the next flower from dropping down on top of the first one. So literally, I'm just going to tie a little knot in my thread. There you go. You can see this little knot being tied, and I'm just going to carefully pull it down so that it's tightened up about 0.5 centimetre. So I don't know if you can see that there. There you go, a little knot, 0.5 centimetre above the bottom flower. And then you just keep going, and you just grab your next little flower, thread it on, and keep adding them all on top of each other until you've got a whole little chain. So next one's threaded on, I do another little knot, and I just keep going. So now, very quickly, to finish off, I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about how you could turn these into, how you put all these together into a hair accessory. There's my next little knot. Push this through up to the top. There we go. Very easily, you see they all stack up. Those little knots make a big difference because it just holds them all apart, so they're going to look really pretty and really kind of delicate and dainty when they're in your hair. Yeah, really nice. So Jessica, how do we turn all of this into a gorgeous big hair accessory all together? Like my lovely red one. Where did I just put it? I had a lovely red one a second. Oh, here we are. There we go. So this is the finished design that, you can go, if you want to go ambitious, you can go the whole hog and make something like this using these techniques we've made, you learned today. Or if you want to, you can just do one flower or just like some little dangles on their own. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. But this is something that I came up with in a Lolita workshop for some others, and it was really popular. I think this is just a really nice arrangement. So I'm going to talk to you about this arrangement I've got here. So I've obviously got my 3 big flowers at the top, and I've also got, to make it into a circle, I've got 2 leaves in between each of the flowers. And And then hanging down the bottom, I've got 2 little dangles. I like to do my dangles with different number of flowers. So this one's 5 and that one's 4. That's my personal preference. You might want to try and do 3 dangles with maybe slightly smaller flowers, or vary the numbers that you've got. But this is what I've been doing. I do 5 on one side and 4 on the other. And that seems to kind of balance out quite nicely when you use the same size squares for all of your elements. So to put it all together, what I would do is I make the backs of these with felt. Now you could use, if you've got any other kind of non-fraying material, that would do as well. But basically what I would do is I would have my felt and I would arrange my flowers onto the felt and glue them all down onto the felt. Now, I like to do this with a glue gun. You don't have to do it with a glue gun. You could just sew them all on. If you don't have a glue gun, you could stitch them all into place. But I like to use a glue gun to glue them all on. So you can sort of see, this is what I started making earlier. So what I do to start off with, I would do my 3 flowers, first of all, and I would space them evenly in a triangle and glue them all in place with a glue gun. Then I would add on my little leaves in between. I've got a 3rd flower here. It's not the right kind, but I'm just going to pin that on so you can see how it all comes together. I start off by doing the flowers, and I glue my 3 flowers in place. Then I would add 2 leaves in between each of the flowers and try and position the leaves so that it makes a nice even circle arrangement. You want your finished design to ideally be like a nice even circle shape. And then what I would do is I then trim down the felt on the back, being careful not to cut my petals. I then trim around the back, and you end up cutting it roughly into a circle like this. And I then just do, you know, once I've sort of roughly cut it out, I then like tidy it up and just trim it so I've got a nice neat circle. Now, if you were sewing these on, at this point, you're going to have, if you haven't glued them, if you've sewn them on, at this point, you're going to have lots of stitching visible on the back of your felt. And we want them to look really beautiful on the back when they're finished. And I'll show you the back of my purple one, because this is the one that I think finished off nicely. So on the back, you can see it looks really lovely. I've got 2 hair clips because I prefer, if I'm doing a large hair ornament, I like to put 2 clips on it. I just feel like it's a lot more secure. For something this large, if you only had 1 clip, it would kind of like fall down and pull on your hair a bit. So I like to use 2 clips on these larger designs. And they are basically glued into some felt. So you can see here that the clips are actually attached into the felt. Now, I did start doing one of these earlier on, which I can show you. Here we are. So you actually are going to have 2 felt circles on the back of it. So you've got the first felt circle that your flowers are all attached to. And then you're going to draw, once it's all stuck onto flowers, you're going to put it on your felt, draw around it with a chalk pencil or a soft, something similar, and cut out another. And this circle is going to go onto the back, and it's going to cover up any messy stitching that you've got going on. Now, before I attach that, this is when I would add my dangling flowers. So I would, you know, take my dangling flowers, like hold them up, like, you know, move them around position, decide where you think they look nice. And then when you're happy with where they're hanging, you can just literally sew the threads onto the back. Use that cord and the needle that you've already got, and just do a few stitches to hold it securely in place on the back. I'd recommend stitching the dangling flowers on rather than gluing them, because I feel like if you just glued them on, it's more likely they might pull out. So I would really recommend like actually stitching with that bit of cord so that they're definitely not going to be able to fall out of your headdress. So once you've got your dangling flowers attached, then you would take your second felt circle that's going to cover up all of that messiness. And I like to, as I said before, I like to actually like fix my hair clips into the felt circle. So I cut little slots, and then I thread it through. And I've actually put a bit of glue on the side that's going to be hidden. I actually sandwich a bit of glue in there so that hair clip is really securely glued onto the felt. All the glue's on the inside. There's no glue on the top, but it's just really secure. And then I would put a bit of glue gun glue in the middle of this and glue it onto the back of my other design. And what I like to do, and this is totally optional, this is sort of me going slightly overboard, making things look really nice. But what I like to do is I also like, once I've glued it on, I also like to do a little blanket stitch around the edge. I'll show you on this one here. So this here you can see, so in the middle of it, there's glue gun glue behind all these clips, holding them all in place. But right round the edge, there's little blanket stitches, just to make it look really neat and to finish it off really nicely. If you just want to use glue, I mean, it'll still look super duper neat if you just use glue to glue it all together, and it'll be fine. But if you want to be a bit extra fancy, a little blanket stitch around the edge just makes it look really cute and really nice. So that's how I would finish it off on the back. I actually had a load of other. I can see we've still got 5 minutes. And I am going to milk every minute of this for sure. I've got a few other bits and bobs here as other options. So other things, I just pulled out a load of different findings that you could use. So you could, this is just a velvet hairband, the kind of thing you could get from Target or Primark if you're in the UK. You could just buy a fabric hairband like this and just sew your flowers onto it. You could sew them all the way across the hairband, do a nice sort of all the way across, which would be really lovely, or just a cluster on one side, depending on what you like. So that's something you could use. I've also got here, I've got brooch backs if you want to do little brooches, and I've got some of these little hair clip backs. These particularly good if you just want to do one little flower on its own. So one here is just a simple 5-petal flower, and so that on its own could make a really nice little hair clip. Be a really lovely thing to make for a little girl. You could make them really tiny and put lots of little ones in your hair, which would be really nice. And I've also got here some hair bobbles. There you go. Everyone's got hair bobbles. So if you don't have any of these fancy craft findings, you don't need to have them. You could just put some on a hair bobble, maybe 2 on some pigtails or some bunches. That would be really cute. I've also got, I'm going to see, okay, fingers at the ready. Does anyone know what one of these are?
What is it?
Can anyone tell? Does anyone know what that is? It is. I'll tell you what it is. That is a shoe clip.
Oh, yeah. Shoe clip.
Right. There you go. Someone's saying bunches are pigtails in America. I wasn't sure. That's why I said bunches and pigtails. In England, bunches are like 2 ponytails. Pigtails are when they're plaited. In England, if you talk about pigtails, they're always 2 plaits. But I wasn't sure. I figured it might be different in America. So that's why I said bunches and pigtails, just to cover all bases. We won't start into pants and all the confusion of the word pants and English and American. I worked in an American costume shop for 6 months in upstate New York, and I had a fantastic time going around the entire wardrobe, relabeling everything in British English. And the costume master was really angry with me. It was so funny. Yeah, literally everything's now written in English rather than in American English. That was my little naughty crime I committed. My favorite American clothing term is sweater vest. I think sweater vest is brilliant. In England, we call sweater vests tank tops, which isn't nearly as nice. I feel like sweater vest is a much better word for a sweater vest. Yeah. So yeah, a shoe clip. So I've actually done these as lovely shoe clips before to put on some shoes. And I've also got in here just a humble safety pin as well. So if you don't have all these little craft findings and you want to make a brooch, like when I was little, I didn't have proper brooch backs. I just used to make brooches using safety pins on the back. So yeah, just work with whatever you've got to hand. Well, we're down to the last minute, so I just want to say thank you everyone so much for tuning in. And if you're watching this as the catch up, thanks for joining us and being interested. I'll put all my various links. Oh, someone's getting in on there now, putting stuff in. But I'll put all my various links in the chat just after this. In case you want to find me and follow me later on. So I'm on Instagram as @JessicaFlapjack. I'll be putting up lots of photos from all these workshops I've been doing. I've been doing lots of other things over Christmas. There's also a link there to subscribe on my website. So I run lots of online workshops, lots of J fashion things and lots of other crafts as well. So if you're interested in coming to more online crafts workshops, I try and time them so that they're at good times for America as well as the UK, because I know there's a lot of people from the US who love doing crafts as much as I do. So if you want to go to my website and subscribe, I will keep emailing you about any future activities that I've got going on. I also run the Otome Sewing Bee, which is a Facebook group, which is a Lolita and J fashion sewing community. And we do, at the moment, we do a sewing class every Sunday at 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock UK time. And we've been doing that the whole way through lockdown. And that's just, it's all free. It's just turn up, bring your project. Sometimes we do workshops. We're actually having a Christmas party tomorrow, which will be really good fun. So if you like doing this kind of thing and you want to do more of it, do check out my website, subscribe, but also go and look for the Otome Sewing Bee on Facebook, and you'll be able to do lots more things like this. I'll shut up now and enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy, well, good, happy lunchtime, America. I'm going to go have my supper now and enjoy the rest of the weekend and all the other panels. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Hayley, for being my after. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for joining.